Ken Kaneki, an ordinary boy who happened to be interested in the same book as a girl. However, little did he know, that same girl would change his life for the worse. When Ken decided to take her out on a date, it turned out he was actually the dessert.
I say...
In the 20th ward, the Aqua building becomes the scene of a troubling incident when suspected ghouls are spotted. The CCG, known for handling ghoul-related matters, promptly dispatches its agents to confront the situation. Upon arriving, they find a female ghoul engrossed in a grisly feast on a pile of corpses. A masked man, tasked with capturing her, faces off with the fearless ghoul. However, her anger at having her meal interrupted leads to a tense confrontation. In her defiance, she seizes the masked man's pliers, leaving him infuriated as she escapes and discards the tool from a building's rooftop. Meanwhile, at a cafe, two friends, Ken Kaneki and Hideyoshi Nagachika, learn about the Aqua building incident from the news in the background. Hideyoshi teases Ken about his crush, leading him to approach the waitress, Toka Kirishima, to place his order. However, Hideyoshi's flirty behavior prompts Ken's disapproval. The atmosphere changes when Rize Kamishiro enters the cafe, catching Ken's attention. Hideyoshi dismisses Ken's chances with Rize and departs, leaving Ken to spend time reading a book. Surprisingly, Ken notices that Rize is also engrossed in the same book. Their eye contact suggests mutual interest, sparking excitement in Ken. He excitedly tells Hideyoshi about his upcoming date with Rize at a bookstore. While Hideyoshi is near the Aqua building with ghoul investigators Nakajima and Kusaba, Ken and Rize go on their date, discussing their favorite author. Ken observes that Rize eats sparingly and learns about her fears surrounding the recent ghoul-related crimes in the area. Promising to protect her, Ken opens up about his life during their walk home. However, the evening takes a dark turn when Rize reveals her ghoul nature by biting Ken and unleashing her deadly Kagyun. In a construction site showdown, Ken appears lifeless after Rize impales him. Before she can devour him, fate intervenes and Rize is crushed by falling steel beams. Ken wakes up in the hospital, unaware of the organ transplant he received from Rize. His left eye's red and black appearance goes unnoticed, but he experiences a loss of appetite, concerning his nurse and Dr. Kanu, who suspect a psychological issue. Leaving the hospital, Ken finds a note from Hyde but struggles to face him or anyone else, isolating himself. Still, Hyde remains resolute in helping his childhood friend. Overwhelmed by panic and a ravenous hunger for human flesh, Ken's emotional turmoil intensifies. He witnesses a ghoul eating a corpse and gets attacked by Nishiki Nishio. Toka intervenes, leading to a territorial dispute, and Nishiki flees. Struggling to control his cravings, Ken rejects Toka's offer of flesh and desperately clings to his humanity. Frustrated, Toka attempts to force-feed him, leaving Ken torn between his identity as a human and the ghoul urges within him. This ordeal marks the beginning of a transformative journey for Ken as he grapples with his newfound ghoul instincts and tries to retain his sense of self. Ken, now a ghoul, struggles to come to terms with his new nature and refuses to consume human flesh, finding it repulsive. This refusal angers Toka, who takes her frustration out on him physically. Their manager, Yoshimura, intervenes, reminding Toka of the purpose of their group. He invites Ken for coffee, explaining that it's one of the few things ghouls can consume besides humans, although it doesn't satisfy their hunger entirely. Yoshimura also provides Ken with a package of meat and offers more if needed. Back at home, Ken wrestles with the temptation to eat the meat given by Yoshimura. He sees an illusion of Rize, who taunts him to give in. However, when he receives a text from his best friend Hyde, he regains control and tosses the meat aside. The next day, Ken returns to school, where Hyde warmly greets him. Hyde introduces Ken to his upperclassman, who turns out to be Nishiki Nishio, the same ghoul who had threatened Ken before. Nishiki behaves as if he doesn't recognize Ken and invites Hyde to his home. Concerned for Hyde's safety, Ken insists on accompanying them, and surprisingly, Nishiki agrees. On their way to Nishiki's home, Ken is surprised to see that Nishiki can eat human food and blend into society seamlessly. However, things take a dark turn when Nishiki suddenly attacks both Hyde and Ken. During the fight, Nishiki injures Ken and then proceeds to vomit the human food he ate earlier onto the unconscious Hyde, taunting Ken and threatening to harm his friend even more. In a moment of desperation, Ken recalls the memories of their cherished friendship from childhood, finding the strength to summon his Kagyun for the first time. He manages to defeat Nishiki, but his hunger still overwhelms him. Amidst the turmoil, Ken is on the brink of succumbing to his cravings and attacking Hyde when Toka appears, attempting to reason with him. However, Ken's insatiable hunger leads to a fierce confrontation between them as she tries to prevent him from harming his friend. Later, Ken wakes up at Anteku, finding a taste of blood in his mouth. Yoshimura reveals that he was fed while unconscious to prevent him from harming Hyde further. Filled with guilt and anxiety, Ken feels isolated and lost. However, Yoshimura offers reassurance, assuring him that he can find a place in both the human and ghoul worlds. He extends an invitation for Ken to join Anteku, where he starts learning how to make coffee. Meanwhile, investigators Amon and Mato are diligently working on the cases involving the binge eater, and Jason, finding a crucial clue in the pliers that Rize had discarded. As Hyde wakes up, he carries a knowing smile on his face, hinting at secrets yet to unfold. In the 20th ward, tensions rise as dangerous ghouls and investigators clash. Dr. Asaki, attending to a patient, experiences terror when Jason, a menacing ghoul, demands new pliers. Meanwhile, Ken, now a waiter at Anteku and a ghoul himself, learns the art of coffee making from Yoshimura, the cafe's manager. Ken wonders about Yoshimura's affinity for humans, which remains a mystery to him. Unexpectedly, Hyde visits Anteku to thank Toka for her assistance after the accident, unaware of their true nature as ghouls. Toka warns Ken that if Hyde discovers the truth, she will take drastic measures. Ryoko and Hinami Fuguchi, ghouls seeking help, also arrive, and Toka promptly aids them. However, she remains tight-lipped about their situation, leaving Ken curious. Toka cryptically asks Ken if Yoshimura has discussed the guys in suits with him. This refers to the CCG, where a meeting is held to discuss ghoul investigations. Amon and Mato are appointed to lead an investigation into the 20th ward, including Jason's actions and the pliers found during a previous encounter. The CCG's ultimate mission is to eliminate all ghouls in Tokyo. At Anteku, Yoshimura teaches Ken to eat human food, giving him sugar cubes to suppress his ghoul hunger. He then asks Ken to help gather food on Toka's behalf, a task that frightens Ken, but he agrees to assist. Ken learns that Anteku scavenges from suicide victims, a grim revelation. On another front, Mato and Amon roam the streets at night, capturing and interrogating ghouls about Jason's pliers. When one refuses to cooperate, Mato ruthlessly kills him. At Anteku, Yoshimura advises Ken to wear a mask for protection and takes him to a mask studio. Ken meets Yuta, an eccentric mask maker, and gets his own mask. Ken's curiosity about Hinami's situation persists, and he insists on helping her. Toka finally explains that Hinami had to separate from her father, leading to her changed behavior. Ken's mask serves as a disguise to protect his identity from investigators. At Anteku, Ken's attempt to talk to Hinami is awkward, but he brings her coffee and apologizes for the interruption. They bond over books, and Ken promises to teach her more about kanji. Meanwhile, a surviving ghoul from Mato and Amon's encounter speaks to a friend about the increasing danger in the 20th ward due to the growing number of investigators and dangerous ghouls. Hinami and her mother visit Anteku, and Hinami seems to be in better spirits. However, as they head upstairs, a mysterious man with a formidable presence arrives at the cafe, sparking intrigue and uncertainty among the staff, showing a keen interest in Ken. However, Ken finds Tsukiyama's behavior unsettling and uncomfortable. Toka, who works at the coffee shop, is annoyed by Tsukiyama's presence and eventually sends him away, though he promises to return. Toka warns Ken to stay away from Tsukiyama, hinting at something ominous about the man. Later, it is revealed that Tsukiyama consumes the eyes of virgins as a meal and seems to be intrigued by Ken's scent, suggesting an unsettling connection between the two. Meanwhile, Toka is seen having lunch with her best friend, Yuriko, at school. Yuriko is concerned about Toka's eating habits and convinces her to try some homemade food. Toka pretends to eat without any issues, but she struggles to keep the food down and feels weak. Back at Anteku, Tsukiyama pays Ken another visit, making him suspicious of the man's intentions. Tsukiyama notices Ken reading a book and invites him to a cafe where the rumored favorite author of the book is said to visit. He mentions being friends with Rize, which piques Ken's curiosity, and they agree to meet again. Reflecting on his encounter with Tsukiyama, Ken realizes that Tsukiyama might not be as bad as he initially thought. I said the same thing about my uncle, and look where that got me, in a basement. If I ever seen another Hisoka from Hunter x Hunter, that would definitely be this dude. Yoshimura, the owner of Anteku, allows Ken to take the day off and informs him that Yomo wants to meet him before he leaves. Yomo takes Ken to an underground area and begins training him in hand-to-hand combat. Following the training, Yomo takes Ken to a bar named Helter Skelter to meet the bar owner, Itori. Itori has heard a lot about Ken from Yomo and tests him by throwing a glass of blood in his face, triggering his ghoul eye to activate. Itori reveals information about one-eyed ghouls, beings born from both human and ghoul parents, whose existence is considered a myth due to the difficulty of ghoul-human pregnancies. At a subsequent meeting with Tsukiyama, they discuss Rize, with Tsukiyama sharing their previous conversation and a painful memory of being rejected by her when he invited her to join his gourmet club. He proposes taking Ken to one of Rize's favorite places. Ken goes to the special place, only to be led into a trap by Tsukiyama's peculiar servants. They drug him with spiked coffee, causing him to lose control of his legs. Ken finds himself in a perilous situation, facing a crowd of ghouls, and Tsukiyama, now calling himself Mr. MM, reveals his plan to make Ken their meal for the night. As Ken struggles to escape, his ghoul eye activates, revealing his true identity as a one-eyed ghoul. Fueled by anger, he manages to break free from an attacker, but the spiked drugs weaken him further. Tsukiyama steps in to save Ken by impaling the attacker, offering Ken as a substitute for the menu. Tsukiyama becomes intrigued by Ken's status as a legendary one-eyed ghoul, and despite pretending it was all a joke, he sees Ken as a valuable treasure to possess. The encounter leaves Ken in a precarious and dangerous situation, entangled with Tsukiyama and the underground world of ghouls. After his intense battle with Taro, Ken wakes up from a nightmare, finding the 20th ward filled with increased ghoul investigator activity, making Anteku's customers nervous. Yoshimura advises Ken to visit Toka, who is sick and resting in the apartment upstairs. As Ken heads to see her, he notices the name Ayato Kirishima on the door, indicating that someone else is also staying there. Ryako, another ghoul, leaves the apartment, leaving Hinami under her care. While helping Hinami with her studies, Ken learns that Toka fell ill because she ate too much. Yuriko, Toka's friend, pays a surprise visit to bring her some food. However, when she sees Ken with Toka, she assumes they are romantically involved and leaves quickly, leaving the stew for them to share. Despite Ken's protests, Toka forces herself to eat the stew, revealing that Yuriko is an important person to her. Meanwhile, Tsukiyama becomes obsessed with what to do about Ken and goes through his extensive library for answers. Sniffing a bloodied handkerchief, he devises a plan. After training with Yomo, Ken encounters Nishiki being attacked by ghouls. Despite Nishiki's past actions towards Hyde and himself, Ken decides to save him. After a fierce fight, Ken helps Nishiki back to his apartment, where he meets Kimi. Initially suspicious of Ken, Kimi warms up to him when Nishiki reassures her. As Nishiki falls unconscious, Ken and Kimi have a conversation about their relationship, and she accepts Nishiki despite knowing he is a ghoul as long as he doesn't harm those she cares about. Later, Kimi is kidnapped by Tsukiyama while buying coffee. Ken finds a rose and a note from Tsukiyama at Anteku, stating that he has taken Kimi and where to find them. Nishiki returns to Anteku despite his injuries, and they decide to rescue Kimi together. They follow Tsukiyama's instructions and reach a church, where a confrontation with Tsukiyama ensues. Tsukiyama plans to eat Ken, but he and Nishiki are disgusted by his selfishness. They fight him, but Tsukiyama's power proves overwhelming. Toka joins the fight, but Tsukiyama's regeneration abilities render her unable to fight alongside Ken. Tsukiyama manages to pierce Ken's abdomen, tasting his blood but restraining himself from fully consuming him. Tsukiyama then targets Kimi, causing Ken to worry. However, Nishiki remembers their past together, his difficult life as an orphan who had to eat the homeless to survive, and his motivation for seeking revenge before going to college. Kimi saved Nishiki during his darkest times, and he recalls how she offered her flesh to keep him alive. Despite their best efforts, Tsukiyama proves to be too powerful and injures them severely. Tsukiyama explains that ghouls require human flesh to use their powers properly, leading Ken to make a decision. He allows Toka to consume his flesh to increase her strength, leading to a fierce confrontation with Tsukiyama, who becomes enraged at losing control over them. Toka defends herself with her powers, making it clear that she will not submit to Tsukiyama's desires. After Toka gains the strength to fight Tsukiyama by consuming a part of Ken's flesh, a fierce battle ensues at the church. Tsukiyama is impressed by Toka's strong fight and plans to use her organs as a garnish. However, when he attempts to harm Kimi, Nishiki intervenes to protect her. This enrages Tsukiyama, and he repeatedly stabs Nishiki. While Tsukiyama is distracted, Toka deals a critical blow to him. Despite his attempts to reach Ken, Toka finishes Tsukiyama off. Nishiki unties Kimi, but Toka, still fueled by anger, considers killing her as she knows too much. Ken pleads with Toka to spare Kimi, but she remains conflicted and attacks. To everyone's surprise, Nishiki shields Kimi with his body, taking the hit for her. When Kimi's blindfold comes off, she sees Toka's beauty, which confuses Toka and makes her run away. After the intense incident at the church, Ken resumes his normal life at Anteku, where Hyde arrives early and is served by Nishiki, who is now working as a waiter. They share lighthearted banter and talk about Toka's absence from work since the church incident. Hinami and Ryako start arguing at the cafe, and Hinami leaves abruptly. Ken tries to talk to her, but his efforts are unsuccessful. Instead, he speaks with Ryako and learns that she wants to see her father. However, her father's shady past is catching up to him, and they have to remain separated for a while. Ryako tries to make amends with Hinami by apologizing and promising to buy her a present as a gesture of change. Meanwhile, Yamori pays a visit to Dr. Fugachi to retrieve his pliers and expresses his eagerness to use them on Rize. However, Dr. Fugachi asks Yamori not to return, leading to a sudden attack from Yamori. He sends Dr. Fugachi crashing through a wall, and outside, Amon and Mato await. Yamori decides to take on Amon and Mato by himself, managing to hold them off for a while before losing interest and leaving. Despite not capturing Yamori, Mato believes they have gathered enough leads for another case related to the Fugachi family. Ken visits Toka at Anteku, but she is still upset and unwilling to return to work. They discuss the recent fight between Hinami and her mother, and Ken realizes that the love between parents and children is the same, regardless of whether they are ghouls or humans. Ken mentions Nishiki and Kimi's relationship as an example of the potential for better understanding between ghouls and humans. However, Toka is uncertain about what Kaneki wants, and he apologizes for bringing up her relationship with Yuriko during the church incident. Ken understands that both he and Toka worry about the consequences if they are rejected by their human friends, Hyde and Yuriko. Ken then checks on Hinami in the meeting room, and they both hope that Toka will feel better soon. Hinami asks Ken about a new word, and he explains what a cloudburst is. Ryako joins them and expresses gratitude to Ken for spending time with Hinami before he departs. As Ken walks through the rain-soaked streets, Nakajima and Kusaba are questioning people about some clothes in photographs. Hyde observes from a distance and comments on the weather. Hinami and Ryako leave a bookstore in the rain, and Hinami excitedly talks about the words she learned from Ken. However, Ryako senses some suspicious men and tries to avoid them, but they spot her. Hinami is confused by her mother's behavior but joyfully runs ahead when she smells her father's scent.
いい雨ですな。
Her mother urges her to run back to Anteku for safety. As Hinami runs through the rain, calling for help and dropping her new book, Ken notices her while walking through the same rainy streets. After Ken found Hinami alone on the street, they decided to search for her mother, Ryako, together. In an alley, they stumbled upon Ryako, cornered by investigators. Ryako attempted to fight back, but she wasn't skilled at using her kagyun. One of the investigators, Mato, taunted and mocked her, even revealing a new weapon made from Ryako's late husband. Before Ryako could say her final words, Mato heartlessly killed her. Ken managed to calm Hinami and hide them both from the investigators, but he was deeply shocked by the tragic event. Later, Toka returned to Anteku and found the coffee shop closed, with everyone looking somber in a meeting room. Yoshimura informed her about Ryako's death and discussed the possibility of relocating Hinami to a safer ward. Fueled by anger and grief, Toka sought revenge. But Yomo and Yoshimura disagreed with her approach. Frustrated with their refusal to retaliate, Toka stormed off. Ken blamed himself for Ryako's death, but Yoshimura tried to comfort him. However, Ken found no solace in his words. During the night, Toka sat alone in her room, feeling upset and contemplating her mask. Ken, on the other hand, broke down in the shower, finding no comfort in Yoshimura's attempts to console him. Meanwhile, at the 20th Ward branch office, Mato and Amon discussed the recent activities of the gourmet and binge-eater ghouls. The investigators concluded that Jason's hideout wasn't in their ward, leaving them with little to do. After work, Amon, Ippei, and Nakajima had dinner together, during which Ippei made a thoughtless remark, leading Nakajima to scold him. On their way home, they were attacked by a girl wearing a rabbit mask, who turned out to be Toka. She killed Ippei, but Amon saved Nakajima and engaged in a fierce fight with Toka without using his usual weapon. Mato also joined the fight. Despite being injured, Toka managed to escape. Back at Anteku, Ken and Hinami heard a loud noise from the next room and discovered that Toka was injured. Yoshimura arrived and deduced that Toka had fought with investigators. He refused to provide her with medical assistance, feeling that she brought this situation upon herself. Feeling that Toka's life was her own responsibility if she chose to put herself in danger, she ran away. Although Ken wanted to go after her, Yoshimura stopped him, and Ken understood that there must be reasons behind his actions. Later, Ken found Toka outside and brought her a first aid kit. Initially, she tried to push him away, believing he wouldn't understand her struggles as an outsider. However, Ken insisted on helping her and listening to her feelings. As they talked, Ken began to empathize with Toka's pain and the loneliness of being a ghoul. He realized that since becoming a ghoul himself, he would feel sadness if someone he knew died. Ken asked Toka to let him assist and support her in any way he could. At the CCG, a service was held to honor Ippei's memory, and Amon was present. Afterward, Marud approached Amon and talked about a new mission he wanted him to join. Later, Nakajima and Amon had dinner together, with Nakajima feeling sad and lonely after losing Ippei. Amon comforted him and asked Nakajima to pay for their meal, which brought a smile to Nakajima's face. Toka and Ken ventured into a dark area, and Toka kept her reasons for being there a secret. She hinted that it was related to her desire to help, but didn't elaborate further. Meanwhile, Mato received a tip about a ghoul known as number 745 but suspected it could be a trap set by Rabbit, the dangerous ghoul he was eager to catch. At home, Amon contemplated the unfairness of ghouls taking lives and expressed his desire to make the world a better place. Lastly, Ken visited HYSY Art Mask Studio to acquire a special mask for dealing with ghouls and investigators. After discussing their strategy to deal with Rabbit and number 745, Amon and Mato decide to split up for their mission. Mato hints at having something special for the task ahead. At Anteku, Ken expresses his willingness to assist Toka, but she appears preoccupied and goes to check on Hinami. To their surprise, Hinami is missing as she follows a scent she detected. Ken and Toka search for Hinami separately, but their efforts are in vain. Eventually, they hear Hinami screaming, and Ken rushes toward her. Toka is seen running with Amon chasing after her. It is revealed that Amon has realized that Toka is the ghoul known as Rabbit due to her extraordinary speed. Ken intervenes and confronts Amon, donning his mask to prevent him from advancing further. They engage in a fierce fight, but Amon proves to be more powerful with his quink weapon. Amon questions ghouls' harmful actions and the despair they cause, reflecting on the death of his friend and blaming ghouls for it. Ken is knocked back repeatedly during the confrontation and contemplates Amon's perspective, realizing the misunderstandings between ghouls and humans. He desires to make Amon comprehend the truth about both worlds, but Amon remains unreceptive. The intense battle takes a toll on Ken, and he eventually resorts to his ghoul instincts, biting Amon during the fight. However, Ken doesn't want to kill him and urges Amon to escape. Meanwhile, Toka finds Hinami near the waterway below the school, clutching a bag containing her mother's remains. Hinami is conflicted about whether ghouls should be allowed to live and yearns to be with her deceased mother. She becomes upset and Toka comforts her. Unexpectedly, Mato arrives and recognizes Toka as Rabbit, taunting her for her failed trap. He questions Hinami about a gift he left for her, which incenses Toka. A fight ensues, and Toka showcases her Kagyun abilities, impressing Mato. However, he falls into one of Toka's traps, giving her an advantage. Mato threatens Toka and Hinami, revealing a new quink made from Hinami's mother, Ryako. He corners Toka against a pillar, planning to turn her into a quink as well. Hinami, distressed by Mato's manipulation of her parents' Kagyun, retaliates and injures him severely. Mato remains determined to kill her, excited about turning her into a quink due to her unique heritage. However, Hinami cannot bring herself to seek revenge and continues to struggle emotionally. Despite her hesitation, Hinami manages to inflict severe injuries on Mato. In a critical moment, Toka instructs Hinami to finish Mato off, but Hinami is unable to do so due to her feelings of loneliness and sorrow over the loss of her parents. Mato persists in attacking, even in his weakened state. Toka intervenes to protect Hinami and kills Mato. As Mato dies, Toka removes a glove from his hand and discovers his wedding ring, realizing he was a family man. Elsewhere, Ken finds himself struggling with his Kagyun near the canal. Hunger and emotional turmoil cause him to lose control, and he accidentally stabs someone approaching him from behind. Yomo arrives to help Ken regain control, and he hands Ken a package.
You're not you when you're hungry. Snickers satisfies.
Together, they find Toka and Hinami and head back to Anteku. Hinami is feeling uncertain about her place in the world, but Ken reassures her that her mother, Ryako, wanted her to live. In the waterway, Amon discovers Mato's lifeless body. He closes Mato's eyes and screams in agony and grief over the loss of his mentor. In a flashback, Amon begins his work at the CCG and is introduced to his partner, Mato, by Arima. They collaborate on a case involving the Applehead Ghoul. The suspect, Kai, turns out to be an elderly woman, and Amon is taken aback by this revelation. They talk to Kai, and her medical records appear normal for a human. Amon is upset that Mato didn't disclose the information about the records, but Mato explains that they can easily be falsified and reassures Amon that everything is part of their plan. However, Amon feels his partner isn't taking the job seriously, and leaves the scene in anger. Later, when Amon encounters Kai struggling with her luggage, he offers to assist her. In private, Kai reveals her true identity as the Applehead Ghoul and attacks Amon. Fortunately, Mato arrives in time to save Amon from harm. Back in the present, Amon runs into Yukinori Shinohara while on his way to visit Mato's grave, and they agree to have a more in-depth conversation later. Meanwhile, the CCG is preparing for a mission in the 11th Ward and brings in Seidu Takazawa and Kusu Kauji to aid in the operation in the 20th Ward. Life at Anteku slowly returns to normal after the tragic events. Ken expresses his interest in learning more about Rize, so he seeks information from Itori. However, Itori can only tell him that Rize originated from the 11th Ward and suggests he investigate there. The following day, Ken informs his friend Hyde that someone stole from him on his way home, but he can't identify the thief. He doesn't seem too bothered by it. The news reports that the CCG is dispatching more investigators to the 20th Ward due to increased ghoul activity and trouble. Meanwhile, the staff at Anteku discuss their concerns about an aggressive ghoul organization that targets investigators. Ken seeks out Toka, and they engage in a heartfelt conversation about their families and personal emotions. On the other hand, Hyde, sitting alone and drinking coffee, overhears Yamori and Nico talking about Rize. He becomes aware of their involvement with her. At the same time, Kazuichi Banju and his group arrive in the 20th Ward, searching for Rize. Unbeknownst to them, Ayato is planning to join them on their mission. The situation in the 20th Ward grows more complex as various characters' paths intertwine in pursuit of their individual goals. The notorious and violent ghoul organization, Aogiri Tree, spreads fear and chaos throughout the different wards, making everyone cautious and on edge. The 11th Ward faces a particularly intense attack, as ghouls band together to target and defeat CCG investigators, resulting in the complete destruction of the 11th Ward branch office. At the 20th Ward branch office, Marud anxiously awaits news about the 11th Ward and is devastated to learn that there were no survivors in the attack. In response to this devastating news, an emergency meeting is held to discuss the situation, and the CCG plans a large-scale counterattack against Aogiri Tree. During the meeting, Juzu arrives late, causing a disruption. After the meeting, Amon and Shinohara spend time researching and strategizing for the upcoming mission. Amon is surprised that Marud allowed Juzu to participate in the operation, but Shinohara believes that Marud must see potential in the young investigator. Shinohara also mentions that Amon's quink was broken and suggests that he can use one of Mato's quinks as it was part of Mato's will. At Anteku, business is slow due to customers' fear of the investigators. When they finally receive customers, it turns out to be Banju and the gas masks, who are associated with the dangerous Aogiri group. Banju demands to speak with the manager, but as the manager is absent, he talks to Ken and Toka instead. Banju becomes angry when he smells Rize scent on Ken and threatens him. In a moment of panic, Ken accidentally headbutts Banju, knocking him unconscious. When Banju regains consciousness, he explains the dire situation in the 11th ward and warns Rize to flee because Aogiri is after her. Ayato, Toka's brother, breaks into Anteku and starts attacking Banju. Toka intervenes and confronts her brother, leading to a heated argument between them. However, their dispute is interrupted when the ruthless Yamori and his associate, Nico, arrive on the scene. Yamori takes a keen interest in Ken, and proceeds to brutally beat him until he's rendered unconscious, intending to take him back to Aogiri. Toka attempts to stop them, but she is overpowered and defeated by Yamori. Fortunately, just in the nick of time, Yoshimura and Yomo return to Anteku and discover that Ken has been abducted. Realizing the severity of the situation, they immediately begin planning a rescue mission. Yoshimura gathers the staff of Anteku to discuss their plan, and unexpectedly, Tsukiyama appears, invited by Yoshimura to assist in the rescue mission to save Ken.
Heartbreak. No kidding.
The situation becomes even more precarious as the stage is set for a high-stakes confrontation with Aogiri Tree. In the 11th ward, the attention is solely focused on the menacing Aogiri Tree, and their actions send ripples of fear throughout the district. The CCG prepares to launch a full-scale attack on Aogiri Tree, aiming to quell their influence and eliminate the threat they pose. At the same time, Anteku is actively planning a daring rescue mission to save Ken, who is being held captive by Yamori, a sadistic member of Aogiri. The atmosphere is tense as Hyde watches the news, worried about the unfolding events. The CCG takes measures to protect civilians, moving them away from the dangerous zone where the clash between Aogiri Tree and the CCG is about to occur. Anteku seeks assistance from Tsukiyama and Yuta for their rescue operation. As the CCG initiates their attack on the 11th ward base, they encounter unexpected challenges posed by skilled sniper ghouls. Juzu takes matters into his own hands and uses Marud's motorcycle to swiftly eliminate the snipers and secure a way inside the base. However, they soon find themselves facing formidable Aogiri members, making their progress difficult. Simultaneously, Anteku capitalizes on the chaos, disguising themselves as Aogiri members to infiltrate the base. While Yoshimura, Hinami, and Kaya wait outside, the rest of the Anteku members venture into the dangerous territory, splitting up to search for Ken. During their infiltration, Tsukiyama, Yomo, and Yuta cross paths with Noro, a formidable and mysterious figure. Toka, on her own mission to find Ken, encounters Amon, but she manages to evade him when the Bin brothers intervene. Amon showcases his new weapon, Kira, as he fiercely fights back against his adversaries. Deep within the base, Ken is held captive in Yamori's sadistic hobby room. Subjected to torture and brief moments of rest for regeneration, Ken's suffering is intensified. Banju and his allies attempt to reach him, promising to save him from this nightmarish dream. As the CCG's strongest investigators continue their progression through the base, they reach the rooftop only to be taken aback by the absence of ghouls, which strikes them as peculiar. Suddenly, the terrifying one-eyed owl makes its appearance, catching them off guard and throwing their plans into disarray. Seeking advice from Marud, they decide to send a select group of elite investigators, fully aware that this decision might come at a significant cost. Back inside the base, Toka desperately searches for Ken but gets attacked by ghoul shards. Nishiki sacrifices himself to save her. In the midst of the turmoil, Ayato emerges, and a tense confrontation unfolds, further heightening the already intense and critical situation within the 11th ward base. As Ken endures the excruciating torture inflicted by Yamori, he begins to experience a series of haunting illusions, guided by a manifestation of Rize Kamishiro, the ghoul who initiated his transformation. These illusions take him back to his childhood, where memories of his mother's overwork and struggles resurface. After his father's death, Ken's mother shouldered the responsibility of raising him and supporting her older sister alone. However, the burden became overwhelming, and she tragically passed away, leaving Ken all alone. During this nightmarish ordeal, Ken finds solace in his close friend, Hyde, who becomes a pillar of support during these trying times. Hyde remains an essential figure in Ken's life and provides strength throughout his journey. Amidst the torture, Yamori employs a coping mechanism to prevent Ken from losing his sanity. He forces Ken to count backwards from 1000 by 7, an activity that consumes his thoughts, distracting him from the torment momentarily. Yamori reveals that Dr. Kanu's plan was to transform Ken into a ghoul, exploiting his newfound regenerative abilities to break him mentally and physically. The sadistic ghoul goes to cruel lengths, even forcing a centipede down Ken's ear, intensifying his anguish and suffering. As the torture continues, Ken's mental state deteriorates, leading him to experience illusions and psychological torment. Yamori further torments him by presenting his friends, Shu and Haru, in front of him, forcing him to make an agonizing choice. Overwhelmed and guilt-ridden, Ken offers himself as the sacrifice, but Yamori mercilessly kills both of his friends in a fit of rage. This immense guilt and trauma push Ken to the brink of despair, and he retreats into a deeply introspective mindset. He confronts his weaknesses, recognizing how his previous beliefs of enduring pain to protect others had caused suffering for his mother. Ken realizes that life often demands compromise and acknowledges that his perceived weakness may lead to unfortunate consequences for his loved ones. Haunted by the illusions and the weight of his choices, Ken undergoes a transformative realization. He fully accepts his identity as a ghoul and embraces the strength within him. This pivotal decision sparks a remarkable transformation in both his mind and body. Breaking free from his shackles, Ken unleashes a ferocious and vengeful onslaught on Yamori. The tables turn as he gains the upper hand, subjecting Yamori to the same torture techniques he once endured. With Yamori defenseless, Ken absorbs his Kagyun, further empowering himself with the strength of his adversary. Hideyoshi Nagachika notices the closure of Anteku and takes it upon himself to search for Ken Kaneki. Simultaneously, in the 11th ward, Ken triumphs over Yamori, exiting the torture chamber wearing his mask. The ghoul known as Owl recognizes him as the investigator who took his arms in a confrontation a decade ago. Owl muses about Yukinori Shinohara's success and regrets not taking Shinohara's dominant arm like he did with his superior. Shinohara and Iwao Kuroiwa grasp the need to confront Owl and advise their colleagues, barring Tei Kurako, to combat Aogiri Tree, focusing on the imminent battle against Owl. Amidst the intense clash with Owl, Kaoru Amon stands his ground alongside Shinohara and Kuroiwa instead of retreating. To gain the upper hand, Shinohara and Kuroiwa activate their formidable Arata proto-armor, and a special quink named Kakuja, albeit at the risk of their body's consumption. Despite landing blows on Owl, Amon and Hirako witness his swift regeneration. As the fight rages on, Shinohara activates a new function on their armor, augmenting its strength but exacerbating its toll on their bodies. The armor's consumption of Shinohara's body becomes evident. Despite their best efforts, Owl prevails. Amid the battle, Owl reflects on the rationale behind killing and deems it inherently evil, dismissing the notion of aiding them, even if a soul resides within the Arata armor. The situation worsens with a building collapse that threatens Kuroiwa and Shinohara. Miraculously, Owl shields them from the debris. Following Owl's retreat, Kuroiwa and Shinohara urge Hirako and Amon to seek safety while they remove their Arata armor. Kuroiwa appears preoccupied by thoughts about Owl, but he pushes them aside. Meanwhile, Amon spots Ken and wonders if he has been part of the conflict. Marud, a high-ranking figure, demands casualty reports and reacts with rage upon learning that about half of the investigators survived the Owl encounter. He curses Owl for the catastrophic outcome. In a formidable battle, Shu Tsukiyama and Yuta unite against Noro, but their endeavors prove fruitless as Noro withstands their assaults. Noro remains impervious even after Yuta's surprise attack. Yomo intervenes with a powerful kick, separating Noro's upper body, yet Noro promptly regenerates. Noro's regeneration surpasses that of a typical ghoul, astonishing the group. Undeterred, Noro departs, prompting Tsukiyama, Yuta, and Yomo to move forward. Kazuichi Banju, Gyro, Ikumi, and Sant find themselves confined but are rescued by Tsukiyama. Toka Kirishima confronts Ayato Kirishima, deeming Aogiri Tree ineffectual. Ayato, however, believes ghouls cannot coexist with humans and must fight to survive. Ayato gains the upper hand against Toka, criticizing her Kagyun. He immobilizes her, bites off and consumes her Kagyun, finding it unappetizing. Ayato expounds on the world's power dynamics and berates Toka's perceived weakness. Ken arrives in time to save Toka from Ayato's assault, engaging in a confrontation. Despite Ayato's strength, Ken counters, disclosing Ayato's motivation for joining Aogiri, which Ayato denies. Injured but resolute, Ken refuses defeat, retaliating with a forceful kick that fuels Ayato's determination to kill him. The battle is interrupted by Noro's appearance, grabbing Ayato and retreating. Meanwhile, Hyde observes events from a distance, while Ito of Aogiri Tree remarks on Ken's newfound strength. Amid the chaos, the 11th ward base crumbles. Ken carries Toka as they, along with Nishiki, leave the rooftop. As the building collapses, ghoul investigators evacuate. Juzu Suzuha drags Yamori's body, seemingly undisturbed by the chaos. Inami and Kaya encounter Nishiki, who advises their departure. Ken departs abruptly, causing Nishiki's concern. Ito speaks with Tatara about the casualty count. Tatara estimates around 200 deaths. Amid the turmoil, Kirona and Nishiro Yasuhisa are approached by a mysterious man, inviting them to join him. Nico of the Clowns mourns his loss but is reminded of their larger plan. As Nico dons his clown mask, a mysterious figure captures his attention. Ken notices Ito's smile, adding to the intrigue. Hyde surveys the scene, and Ken shocks Toka by revealing his intention to join Aogiri Tree. Now you may be asking yourself, why is he joining the people that kidnapped and tortured him? I don't know, but it probably made sense in the manga. Toka tries to follow but collapses. Ken heads to Aogiri Tree, welcomed by executives, with Ito excited. Ayato, however, is visibly upset by Ken's presence. During an important investigative meeting, all the special class investigators are present, excluding Kishu Arima. His absence sparks curiosity and discussions among the attendees. Kyoko Ora finds it noteworthy, while Maugan Tanakamaru deems it impolite. Itsuki Marud perceives it as typical of Arama's behavior. Conversely, Kori-ui is displeased by his non-attendance, contrasting it with Yukinori Shinohara's swift return from the hospital. The meeting commences with Yoshitoki Washu's arrival, focusing on the escalating threat posed by Aogiri Tree, a potent ghoul organization led by the ghoul with the eye patch. Since the 11th Ward battle, Aogiri Tree has aggressively expanded its influence into neighboring wards. Furthermore, the ghoul with the eye patch is suspected in the death of Kiryu-Mato, prompting Yoshitoki to assign Shinohara to further investigate this individual. Yoshitoki detects a pattern in Aogiri Tree's assaults and predicts the next targets to be either the 3rd or 13th Ward. To counter this threat, Yoshitoki plans to summon reinforcements from the remaining wards, causing concern for Kyoji Misaka due to the potential involvement of the 23rd Ward. Moreover, Yoshitoki expresses apprehension about Owl's connection to Aogiri's rapid advancement, aiming to prevent a recurrence of events from a decade ago. After the meeting, Yukinori Shinohara and Iwao Kuroiwa converse privately about Owl. Their previous encounters with Owl differ, with Kuroiwa participating in a past Owl extermination marked by heavy casualties, while Shinohara was part of a later battle with no fatalities. Kuroiwa shares theories, and they agree to keep their discussion confidential for now. Later, Shinohara receives an inconspicuous delivery from someone. Meanwhile, Hideyoshi Nagachika assumes his role as a new part-timer at the CCG, seemingly monitoring situations from within the organization. After Anteku's break, the staff readies the cafe for reopening. Nishiki Nishio grumbles about the workload, envious of Hinami's diligence. Genji Koma chastises Nishiki for tiring easily, especially when Hinami remains industrious. Nishiki inquires about Toka and is informed by Kaya Irami that Toka is studying at Kamiai University, a prestigious institution she worked hard to enter, driven by a sense of purpose. At Kiyomi High School, Toka fabricates a robbery story to explain her injuries to her friend Yuriko Kasaka during lunch. Yuriko expresses joy at Toka's impending return to work, but Toka is more focused on her studies. Later, at school, Toka overhears students discussing ghoul attacks and their negative views on ghouls, stoking her bitterness toward Ken. Toka and Yuriko study late, with Yuriko playfully suggesting Toka is following her boyfriend, referring to Ken. Toka's emotional reaction highlights her complex feelings. Afterward, Toka heads to work at Anteku, participating in its reopening celebration. Surprisingly, Itori and Yuta visit, gifting Hinami with a cockatiel mask. Seidu Takezawa watches Juzu Suzuya mend his arm, discontent and concerned about civilian perceptions of their actions. Juzu's threat to stitch Takezawa's mouth shut escalates their disagreement until Yukinori Shinohara intervenes. Kusu Kauji arrives, and Shinohara inquires about Kaotaru Amon to update him on his new partner. At a graveyard, Amon visits Kiryu-Mato's grave, discussing his investigations and promotion. Akira Mato approaches, introducing herself as Amon's partner and a former classmate with a competitive history. At the office, Takezawa's discomfort at Akira's presence is evident. In the meeting, Yoshitoki Washu assigns high priority to Eyepatch, linked to Aogiri Tree and suspected in Kiryu-Mato's death. The 20th Ward, where Eyepatch was first encountered, might become Aogiri territory. Seidu Takezawa suggests other high-priority ghouls in the 20th Ward might be connected, opposed by Akira. She presents research indicating a different faction's control over the ward, supported by Yukinori Shinohara. Following the meeting, Amon requests Akira to coexist with Takezawa, leading to a contentious exchange. Amon's advice on interacting with Akira is sought by Amon. Shinohara recommends inviting her to dinner. Despite unexpected behavior, Amon approaches Akira, who refuses his invitation due to eating habits. Shinohara checks on Amon, bewildered by his reaction. In another operation, Ken partners with Ayato Kirishima to raid CCG headquarters, resulting in investigator casualties. Ken rests with coffee at an Aogiri base, but Ayato summons him for another mission. Ito awaits them at an abandoned subway station, joined by Aogiri forces. They target a convoy, while Kiro and Shiro observe from a distance. Ito chooses not to partake, instead wandering alone and encountering mystery. Ito undresses, addressing Ken with a smile from an unknown location. Ken and Ayato interrupt a truck transporting Naki, a subordinate of Yamori. In this confrontation, they face an attack from enigmatic twins, Kurona and Nishiro Yasuhisa, one-eyed ghouls. However, the twins evade capture by Ken and Ayato. Following the truck's explosion aftermath, Naki emerges from the blaze, engaging in an intense battle with Ayato. Deeply distraught, Naki calls for Yamori, blaming himself for the explosion. Ayato manages to subdue Naki, triggering his frustration and anger. Subsequently, in an abandoned mall, Naki mourns Yamori's death, struggling to write his name as a tribute. Ken steps in, inscribing Yamori's name for him. As Ken departs, he unknowingly becomes a subject of observation for Ito and Tatara in the distance. In the meantime, Aogiri Tree guards circulate rumors, depicting Ken as strong and responsible for Yamori's demise. Among the guards, Shu Tsukiyama, who had been in disguise, enthusiastically reacts to the news. Kazuichi, Ikumi, Jiro, and Sant join the scene, capturing a guard for interrogation. At Toka's apartment, Hinami reads from the hangman's MacGuffin, prompting a discussion with Toka. A news broadcast about ghouls on Shoto Expressway, led by an eye-patch-wearing figure, disrupts their conversation. Toka switches off the television, distancing herself emotionally from Ken, no longer associated with Anteku. Hinami speculates that Ken must have reasons for his actions, but Toka is determined to sever emotional ties. At Anteku the next day, Kaya Irami notices Toka's somber demeanor, leading to a conversation about the incident with Hinami. Hinami, dressed in Toka's clothes, asserts independence for Takatsuki's book signing, rejecting Toka's companionship to avoid burdening her. Irami assures Toka that Koma discreetly follows Hinami. Nishiki Nishio enters Anteku, proudly noting Hinami's growth, playfully embarrassing Toka. Their playful encounter is disrupted by a fleeting attempt to attack Nishiki. Realizing Toka's application to Kamai University, Nishiki offers a partial campus tour. During their visit, Toka stumbles upon a missing persons poster for Ken, torn down by Hideyoshi. They meet and share coffee, Hyde recounting Ken's past as an actor adept at concealing emotions. Hyde speculates that Ken's burdens led to his departure. Toka makes a mental note of Ken touching his chin when hiding something. Concurrently, Hinami attends a book signing event where Sen Takatsuki arrives late. Hinami reveals the book is intended for Ken, causing Takatsuki to pause. Speculating on their relationship, Takatsuki inquires if Ken is Hinami's boyfriend, clarified by Hinami as an older sibling figure. Following Hinami's exit, Takatsuki ponders Ken. Yukinori Shinohara guides Juzu Suzuya to the CCG laboratory division to retrieve his quink, fashioned from Jason, a notable ghoul from Juzu's past. The quink excites Juzu, who tests it by effortlessly destroying quink steel. Naming it 13's Jason after himself, Juzu learns investigators are free to choose quink names. Meanwhile, at CCG 20th Ward's branch office, Kusuke Hauji and Seidu Takazawa delve into archives due to Hauji's unease over Akira Mato's comments. Hauji uncovers pertinent details in old articles. Later, Hyde approaches Takazawa, engaging in a conversation about ghouls, Naki, Eyepatch, and ghoul organizations. Akira intervenes, noticing Hyde's in-depth knowledge but halting the discussion. Hauji and Takazawa share their theories about Eyepatch, referencing an incident involving Ken and a woman 4 months prior. Both Ken and the doctor who transplanted his organs vanished after the incident. Akira highlights Ken's Kamai University connection. Itsuki Maru and Yashitoki Washu engage in a crucial discussion regarding forthcoming operations against the surging influence of Aogiri Tree. Despite the previous setback in the 11th Ward battle, Yashitoki is requested to return to the front lines. To bolster their efforts, he urges Maru to become his second in command. However, the identity of Owl still remains elusive despite their endeavors. In pursuit of answers, they decide to consult a ghoul named Priest and have dispatched Kaotaru Amon for the interrogation. This step is pivotal for gaining insights into Aogiri Tree's plans and Owl's true identity. As Amon visits Cochlea, he reminisces about his distressing past at the orphanage under Donato Porpora's care. Amon recalls witnessing Donato dismembering his friend's corpse, causing Donato to sever their bond. Puzzled as to why he was the sole survivor of this gruesome incident, Amon is tormented by questions. Within Cochlea, Akira Mato accompanies Amon, uncertain about the purpose of their visit. Amon keeps his intentions concealed, leaving Akira curious. While Akira examines Donato's file, suspicions about Amon grow stronger. During a private interrogation, Amon grills Donato for information on Aogiri Tree and Owl. However, Donato feigns ignorance, frustrating Amon's quest for answers. As Amon prepares to depart, Donato alludes to Amon's crucifix, a symbol of his past. As the situation escalates, Cochlea faces chaos as Aogiri launches an attack, freeing prisoners and clashing with CCG personnel. Ayato Kirishima and Ken participate in the battle as part of Aogiri's forces, each with individual objectives. Simultaneously, Tatara and Noro unleash devastating assaults, and Ito watches with disappointment. Amid the mayhem, Kirona and Nishiro Yasuhisa infiltrate with the intention of finding Ken. Akira and Amon face a dire situation against Naki and Gogi and Gyuj. Akira deploys her chimera Quink, Amatsu, injuring Naki and employing a control RC gas grenade to weaken the ghouls. Naki, despite injuries, continues a fierce fight, biting Akira's leg. Amon intervenes to protect Akira from the horde. Despite injuries, Naki persists, prompting Akira to offer her sacrifice. However, Amon refuses, prioritizing Akira's safety. Meanwhile, Yukinori Shinohara and Juzu Suzuya answer a distress call from Kusuke Hauji, joining the fray. Juzu takes on ghouls with ruthless efficiency, encountering Kirona and Neshiro, once acquaintances known as Rei before Juzu became an investigator. Despite their unease, Juzu probes their reasons for becoming ghouls. The twins cite a twisted world as their motivation. Juzu's curiosity about their dynamics drives them to combat. In another confrontation, Ayato faces Shinohara in a cleared zone, igniting a fierce duel. Ayato's prowess prompts Shinohara to deploy his formidable Quink, Arata. Recognizing the Quink's origin, Ayato intensifies his attack. Meanwhile, Ken reaches a desolate section of the prison where he intends to release Shachai. However, Shachai attacks upon sensing Rize scent on Ken. Despite resistance, Ken is subdued. Just before the fatal blow, Ito intervenes, offering Shachai the prospect of seeing Rize. They leave Ken amidst prisoners' corpses in the next room, where he undergoes a transformative process triggered by consuming the bodies. Amidst the tumultuous battle within Kokli, a reunion takes place that bridges the past and present. Juzu Suzuka crosses paths with Kirona Yasuhisa and Nishiro Yasuhisa, stirring memories of their shared cadet days at the academy. The recollections evoke the camaraderie they once shared, back when they were hopeful cadets aspiring to become ghoul investigators. The Yasuhisa twins recall their interaction with Kaotaru Amon, who had inspired them with his lecture about the potential for women to excel as investigators. This conversation infused them with hope for a future where their gender would not hinder their aspiration. However, the trio's optimism was marred by tragedy. The death of their friend, Shizuku Kawakami, left Kirona and Nishiro heartbroken. At Shizuku's grave, their grief deepened when they encountered Juzu, whose apparent lack of empathy towards Shizuku's demise disturbed them. Juzu's nonchalance towards her passing, coupled with his disturbing act of killing ants, troubled the twins. In the current battle, Juzu relishes combat against Kirona and Nishiro, showcasing his formidable skills. They manage to disarm him of his Quink, 13's Jason, momentarily gaining an advantage. Yet, Juzu reveals concealed Quink knives and unleashes a relentless assault. Kirona collapses from his attacks, and Nishiro is next in line. In a brutal sequence, Juzu inflicts severe injuries on Nishiro, who faces a near-fatal blow. Kirona, in a desperate bid to save her sister, carries Nishiro away from the violent confrontation. Simultaneously, Kusukauji and Seidu Takizawa arrive at Koklia, only to find a grim scene of dead guards. As the confrontation escalates, Tatara emerges and demands the release of two ghouls, Fei and Yan, held by the CCG. Hauji engages Tatara in a fierce battle, with Tatara displaying his formidable abilities. However, as the fight wears on, Hauji's exhaustion becomes evident. Takizawa intervenes, providing support and launching an attack that takes Tatara by surprise. The sudden alarm prompts Tatara to retreat as CRC gas floods the area, impeding pursuit. Meanwhile, Ayato Kirishima finds himself locked in a grueling battle against Yukinori Shinohara, who wears the powerful Arata suit. Struggling to gain the upper hand, Ayato's mind is drawn into memories of his childhood, reminiscing about his father's presence and sudden departure. This introspection elicits a rare display of sadness from Ayato, which bewilders Shinohara. However, Ken's unexpected intervention turns the tide. Ken's transformed state, enhanced by his Kakyuja, clashes with Shinohara's prowess. The fight escalates as Ken reveals his multiple Kagyun and astonishing regenerative abilities. However, as the battle rages on, Ken's mental stability begins to waver, culminating in a powerful blow against Shinohara. Meanwhile, Amon aids Akira Mato as they await reinforcements. Their path crosses with the wounded Kirona and Nishiro, and recognition passes between them. However, the twins quickly move on. The encounter raises Amon's concern about humans turning into ghouls, indicated by their single Kakyugan. As their journey continues, they stumble upon Ken seemingly consuming Shinohara, igniting Amon's anger. Amon confronts Ken, chastising him for acting like any other ghoul. The confrontation takes an unexpected turn when Ken's remorse surfaces, and he halts his assault, overcome with emotion. Yet, the entrance of the one-eyed owl alters the course of events, as Ayato and Ken are whisked away by its intervention. The encounter leaves Amon unsettled, highlighting the ongoing uncertainty and conflict. As Ken grappled with the activation of his Kakyuja, its uncontrollable nature became a significant burden. He was plagued by sudden and excruciating cramps, triggering destructive rampages when he couldn't rein it in. Holding back this overwhelming power demanded immense mental resilience, leaving him drained. Amid the second Koklia raid, his notoriety as a perilous ghoul surged, casting the 23rd Ward as a hazardous zone. Humans and ghouls alike propagated unsettling rumors, weaving a tapestry of fear and fascination around him. Roma Hoyo, a new and somewhat clumsy addition to Anteku's staff, found herself developing a crush on Ken, much to the annoyance of Hinami, who was frequently bothered for information. Toka, preoccupied with her entrance exams, inadvertently caught wind of the gossip surrounding Ken despite her absence from work. Within the CCG, Ken's reputation was equally tarnished. Yukinori Shinohara's survival after their encounter solidified Ken's classification as a dangerous ghoul. After Shinohara's recuperation, Juzu Suzuya, who had spent most of his time in solitude, discovered solace in visiting the zoo. But a chance encounter triggered his haunting memories, resurfacing his traumatic past as a scrapper under Big Madam's sinister influence. Haunted by disturbing memories of earning good boy points through brutal acts, Juzu recalled how the CCG's intervention during a raid on the ghoul restaurant changed his life trajectory. Rescued yet grappling with his violent tendencies, Juzu's rehabilitation was championed by Shinohara. Upon Shinohara's release from the hospital, their bond deepened over conversations about giraffes, the strength of the formidable owl, and reflections on life and mortality. Their newfound camaraderie formed a heartwarming friendship. In the aftermath of the Cochlea events, Amon's mind was consumed by the concept of humans turning into ghouls. He embarked on an investigation into Kirona Yasuhisa and Nishiro Yasuhisa, all while the enigma of Eyepatch lingered heavily. His unease escalated when Hideyoshi Nagachika referred to Eyepatch as scary. Seeking a distraction, Amon agreed to a dinner with Seidu Takazawa and extended an invitation to Akira Mato. However, the evening took an unexpected turn, with Takazawa and Akira's drunken spat leaving them alone to grapple with their emotions. Akira carried a load of grudges stemming from a painful past. She harbored resentment toward Owl and Rabbit for her parents' demise, despised the CCG's flawed achievement system, and held herself responsible for her father's downfall. Amon, who admitted his culpability in her father's death, offered to shield her as a form of atonement. As their tangled emotions unfolded, Akira's loneliness due to her father's absence was misconstrued by Amon, leading to a series of self-imposed penances. In the larger scheme of things, Yashitoki Washu orchestrated the formation of a specialized owl suppression team. This elite group aimed to confront the ominous owl, now recognized as the mastermind behind Aogiri Tree. Their paramount goal was to pinpoint Owl's location and dismantle Aogiri Tree completely, a mission of utmost significance. Hinami's concern for Ken's impact on others, particularly Toka Kirishima, remained steadfast. Observing Toka's intense dedication to securing a spot at Kamai University, Hinami senses the weight of love's complexity and the necessity of understanding it better. Seeking guidance, she approaches Nishiki, hoping to unravel the enigma of love. Nishiki finds the task challenging, attempting to encapsulate love's essence in words. He describes it as an emotion that drives individuals to be with someone, to care for them and perform selfless acts of affection. In an attempt to allay Hinami's anxieties, Shu Tsukiyama intervenes. Assuring her that Ken is alive, he takes her to a cafe reminiscent of their shared memories. In a coincidental twist, Sen Takatsuki, a renowned author, makes her entrance. During Tsukiyama's brief absence, Hinami opens up to Takatsuki about her predicament. The celebrated writer offers candid counsel, acknowledging the limits of what Hinami can do to aid Ken in his current state. Takatsuki leaves her business card as a lifeline, suggesting that Hinami can reach out for help. Takatsuki subsequently arrives at CCG headquarters, leveraging her fame for an exclusive interview. Yukinori Shinohara and Juzu Suzuya are chosen to engage with her. Throughout the conversation, Takatsuki unveils her plan to pen a novel centered on ghouls, prompting specific inquiries. She delves into the prospect of creating artificial ghouls through ghoul-human organ transplantation. Shinohara expresses skepticism, pondering the rationale behind engendering more perilous entities. Meanwhile, Ken's mental stability spirals downward. Nightmares and inner turmoil haunt him, leaving him in a state of anguish. Desperate for guidance, he returns to Anteku, seeking counsel from Yoshimura, who has been diligently seeking answers. During their private conversation, Hinami learns of Ken's presence and hurries to inform Toka. As Toka confronts Ken on a bridge, he shares his reasons for joining Aogiri Tree, a desperate attempt to protect her and the sanctity of Anteku. However, Toka remains skeptical of his motives, accusing him of self-centeredness. As Ken fabricates truths, Toka's frustration erupts into a physical altercation. Despite Ken's enhanced abilities, Toka's emotional onslaught leaves him defenseless. The fight intensifies, with Toka demanding that he steer clear of Anteku. The emotional rift dismantles Ken's defenses, rendering him incapacitated against Toka's onslaught. Left battered and vulnerable, Ken questions the path he has traversed, grappling with the overwhelming change and its toll. Subsequently, Juzu Suzuya and Yukinori Shinohara visit Anteku, seeking answers about Ken's whereabouts. Enjoying a meal during their interrogation with Yoshimura, Shinohara's investigation targets Ken, who was once part of the cafe's staff. Yoshimura reveals that they lost contact with Ken around 2 months prior, aware only of his recent organ transplant and ensuing health issues. A sense of familiarity stirs in Shinohara, hinting at a possible prior connection with Yoshimura, which the latter denies. Post-conversation, Juzu and Shinohara express gratitude for the service and intend to revisit Anteku for more leads about Ken's fate, hoping to untangle his enigmatic situation further. Meanwhile, during Ken's conversation with Yoshimura, his curiosity about the one-eyed owl is palpable. Yoshimura shares a tragic narrative about a powerful ghoul named Kyuzan. Kyuzan, once a ruthless ghoul assassin driven by survival, meets a waitress named Yukina at a cafe he frequents. Their relationship blooms despite his ghoul identity, and she accepts him wholeheartedly. Their love deepens, and Yukina becomes pregnant, giving birth to a one-eyed ghoul, defying the odds. Tragedy befalls their family as a vengeful figure, the one-eyed owl, emerges, harboring deep resentment. Yoshimura discloses to Ken that the one-eyed owl is, in fact, Kyuzan's child. Back at Anteku, the atmosphere remains vibrant despite the bustling activity. Toka's meeting with Ken has alleviated some of her anxieties, allowing her to embrace her school life with greater ease. As college approaches, Toka and her friend Yuriko ponder their future. Eventually, Toka returns to Anteku, and with teamwork, they manage the increased workload. In a light-hearted moment, Enji Koma jests about the cafe's ultimate weapon, hinting at Renji Yomo, an old colleague. Yomo's expertise in making coffee is acknowledged, though his manners were less refined. After closing, Toka prepares to stay with Yomo during Anteku's renovation. However, before they depart, Yomo confers with Yoshimura, uncovering disconcerting news. Meanwhile, Yukinori Shinohara's report about visiting Anteku raises questions for Itsuki Marud. The report's reliance on instinct rather than concrete evidence is puzzling, yet Marud finds it hard to disregard Shinohara's expertise. Despite inquiring further, Marud initiates a recon team investigation. As information trickles in, the CCG office bustles with investigators exchanging intel. Hideyoshi Nagachika becomes curious about the heightened activity and inquires with Seidu Takezawa. However, Takezawa feigns ignorance, leaving Nagachika perplexed. At the end of the day, Yukinori Shinohara pays an unexpected visit to Anteku. He engages in a conversation with Yoshimura, during which they share a drink and discuss the art of making coffee. Analogies about coffee beans as individuals underscore the importance of treating each uniquely. As Shinohara departs, Koma and Kaya Irimi join Yoshimura for a final cup of coffee. Their camaraderie unveils a sense of unresolved sentiment in Yoshimura. Amidst these events, Itsuki Marud and Yashitoki Washu approach CCG's chairman Tsunayoshi Washu to seek approval for an operation targeting the owl. Anteku becomes their focus as Marud and Washu strategize to eliminate the threat posed by the owl. Upon receiving authorization, Yashitoki Washu proceeds with the operation aimed at eradicating the one-eyed owl threat. CCG officers participating in the mission take a moment to pen down their potential last words, mentally preparing themselves for the perilous task that lies ahead. Amid this tense atmosphere, Kaotaru Amon pays a visit to the grave of his fallen comrade, Tauko Haruma. Here, he unexpectedly encounters Akira Mato, who is also honoring her father's memory. Akira opens up about her parents' tragic past, recounting their fateful encounter with the formidable owl in the 24th Ward. The unprepared investigative team had retreated, but Kasuga Mato, Akira's father, valiantly stayed behind, sacrificing himself to cover their withdrawal. This incident deeply scarred her father and fueled his obsession with seeking revenge on the owl. Now, Akira aims to fulfill her father's vendetta. Amon worries that her quest for vengeance might drive her to rash actions. This sentiment irritates Akira, who perceives Amon as likening her to Haruma. In a bid to bridge their emotional divide, she makes an attempt to kiss Amon, but he rejects her advance. Disheartened, Akira departs, expressing that his refusal is typical of him. As the night of the operation dawns, the CCG springs into action, dispatching forces to Anteku to eliminate the one-eyed owl. However, they are met with an unexpected onslaught led by Enji Koma and Kaya Irimi, former Ghoul Gang members. In parallel, Yoshimura faces the owl's main force head-on. The Black Dobers and Apes, under Koma and Irimi's leadership, unleash chaos and devastation, inflicting severe damage on the CCG ranks. Yet, the situation shifts as high-ranking investigators Chu Hachikawa and Mugen Tanakamaru engage the ghouls in combat. Amidst this turmoil, Yoshimura displays his formidable strength, ruthlessly eliminating the investigators opposing him, leaving survivors in terror. In the midst of the battle, Yukinori Shinohara and Iwao Kiroi will make a grand entrance in their formidable Arata armors. The revelation that their opponent is the Anteku Cafe manager shocks them. Elsewhere, Renji Yomo confronts Toka Kirishima, who seeks to leave his apartment upon seeing news of the 20th Ward's attack. Yomo explains that Koma, Irimi, and Yoshimura have chosen to join the ongoing conflict as a form of penance for their past actions as ghouls. This revelation stirs a profound conflict within Toka, who acknowledges her own role in taking lives and wrestles with her sense of guilt and the weight of her actions. As Ken prepares to join the battle, Nishiki Nishio joins him in a heartfelt conversation about their decisions. Nishiki reassures Ken that Toka and Hinami are safe, alleviating some of Ken's concerns. Despite this reassurance, Ken grapples with guilt for inadvertently involving Nishiki in the dangerous situation. Their discussion is interrupted as Shu Tsukiyama arrives, distraught and frantic, attempting to dissuade Ken from what he perceives as a suicide mission. Tsukiyama's desperation stems from his overwhelming grief, urging Ken not to venture into the battlefield. However, Ken remains steadfast in his resolve, undeterred by Tsukiyama's pleas. This results in a confrontation between Ken and Tsukiyama, with Ken ultimately prevailing. Despite Tsukiyama's impassioned pleas, Ken stands firm, determined to face the imminent dangers and protect those dear to him. In the midst of the impending battle, the emotions, conflicts, and determination of these characters highlight the intricate web of relationships and the complexities of their choices. Amidst the ongoing clash between the CCG and Anteku, Koma, Irimi, and Yoshimura engage in intense combat against the special investigators. Tragically, a civilian becomes ensnared in the crossfire, yet Hachikawa unrelentingly persists in his attacks. Unexpectedly, Shinohara receives a surprising piece of advice that leaves him taken aback. Following the defeat of Koma and Irimi, Ken arrives in the nick of time to rescue them from peril. The battle's ferocity reaches its zenith as Yoshimura finds himself encircled by a formidable assembly of special-class ghoul investigators and their allies. With their combined might, they launch a relentless offensive against the one-eyed owl, overpowering him despite his swift regeneration abilities. As the ghoul sustains grievous wounds, he succumbs to the relentless assault, and is eventually overwhelmed, subdued by the coordinated efforts of the CCG team. The protracted and arduous battle concludes with Yoshimura seemingly defeated, felled by the CCG's collective might. His struggles are evident as he fights to move, his mind plagued by visions of Yukina before he finally collapses under the weight of his injuries. Meanwhile, Ken finds himself ensnared in an ambush orchestrated by Amon and a contingent of CCG members. In a resolute proclamation, Amon underscores his unwavering commitment to fulfill his mission. Amidst the jubilation within the CCG ranks over their apparent triumph against Yoshimura, an unexpected twist unfolds. The genuine one-eyed owl makes a sudden and unanticipated appearance, launching a surprise assault that shatters the illusion of victory. The battle's complexion undergoes a drastic transformation, introducing a fresh wave of danger and uncertainty. Amid the chaotic turmoil, Juzu Suzuya finds himself confronting the newly arrived one-eyed owl in solitude, as Yukinori Shinohara suffers grave injuries. The formidable Aogiri Tree, a potent ghoul organization, enters the fray against the CCG, leaving the investigators overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of their adversaries. Meanwhile, Ken's path is blocked by Amon, and he expresses his reluctance to engage in combat. Ken laments the missed opportunities for discussion and understanding, had they not been on opposing sides. Amon seemingly grasps Ken's sentiment, yet insists that reconciliation is untenable, launching an attack nonetheless. In another part of the battlefield, Seidu is overpowered and captured by Tatara, a high-ranking member of the Aogiri Tree. Despite Tatara's demands, Seidu remains resolute in withholding information about Kusukauji's whereabouts. In response, Tatara subjects Seidu to brutal punishment, orchestrating an assault that results in severe injuries. Hyde, observing from a distance, is a horrified witness to these events. Tragically, Hyde becomes the target of Noro, prompting an imminent threat to his life.
No, wait!
As the confrontations unfold, the clashes between the CCG and the Aogiri Tree underscore the escalating tension and uncertainty of unfolding events. The intense face-off between Amon and Ken culminates in both combatants sustaining severe wounds. The narrative then shifts to Juzu, whose attempts to harm the owl prove futile. Arima, a highly skilled CCG investigator, intervenes in the nick of time, rescuing Juzu. Arima engages the owl in a fierce confrontation, skillfully evading its attacks and inflicting serious damage with his ghoul-derived quink. Amid the battle, the owl makes a bold move by directly assaulting Arima. However, this effort results in the owl losing one of its arms. In a desperate gambit, the owl consumes Yoshimura, its former leader, before retreating from the scene. The narrative subsequently focuses on an injured Ken, his struggle to return to Anteku, and Akira's discovery of her partner's quink remnants, evoking deep sorrow. When the owl disgorges Yoshimura, unveiling an astonishing truth, the owl and Sen Takatsuki are one and the same, hinting at a more complex narrative than initially apparent. A poignant reunion takes place at Anteku between Ken and Hideyoshi Nagachika. Their conversation is laden with honesty and emotion. Hyde admits that he was aware of Ken's ghoul nature all along and laments their growing distance. Despite understanding Ken's struggles and transformation, Hyde had wanted to remain a supportive friend.
Yes! Oh my god, yes!
The heartfelt talk concludes as Hyde's injuries overcome him, causing him to collapse.
I want to know.
Amidst the ongoing battle, Toka reflects on her journey at Anteku, a place of personal growth and happiness. However, the once serene establishment now lies in ruins, consumed by flames. Amid the chaos, she witnesses Ken carrying Hyde away. Toka's attempt to approach them is thwarted by Yomo, who either seeks to safeguard her or allow Ken to forge his own path. Determined to bear his burden alone, Ken departs, carrying Hyde's lifeless form. The battleground echoes with desolation and silence, strewn with the fallen, the mourners, and the injured. The war's outcome remains uncertain, leaving behind a shattered district and lingering chaos. The aftermath of the destructive conflict casts a shadow on who truly emerged victorious. The once tranquil area now stands fragmented, its former beauty replaced by devastation. Later, Ken encounters Arima, the invincible CCG member who managed to compel the real owl's retreat. A lone figure, Ken faces Arima, armed and resolute, setting the stage for a final confrontation. The outcome hangs in suspense as the story unfolds. Time passes since the Anteku raid. Toka establishes a new coffee shop in town, realizing her long-held aspirations. Similar to Yoshimura, her coffee shop serves as a gathering place, fostering connections among people. That concludes the anime recap. As always,